Now let's see. Twitch has accepted the stream. YouTube has accepted the stream.
Oh, and one other thing. I need from you, Richard, the link, or else for you to put it up on the Western New York Peace Center.
I can put it up, so that'll save you some time.
Thank you.
You want me to put it up before the show starts or after it starts?
You can put it up whenever it's most convenient for you, really.
All right. Okay, so you see the timer?
Yes.
All right. When it says on the air, that's when you're on the air, okay?
Yeah, I never forget.
Here we go.
And then towards the end, I'll sort of give you all a warning, but you can see it. But that we'll just, we'll have like final words kind of thing. And then, yeah.
Okay, here we go.
It'll be just under an hour. Okay, thanks. Welcome to Talking Peace with the Western New York Peace Center, being recorded by Richard Wicca, our producer, at Think Twice Radio, in the home of the future. Thank you so much, Richard, and Think Twice Radio. We also thank our friends at Buff State, Buffalo's original alternative radio station, WBNY 91.3 FM. Thank you so much, Buff State, and the communications and radio station. And while we're thinking of thankfulness, I do think of our Indigenous friends and that actually people who have been so put upon, both our Indigenous friends as well as enslaved people who, in spite of just horrific treatment in the hands of oppressors, which includes heavily on the colonialism and the stealing of indigenous lands and the enslavement of peoples, that our Indigenous brothers and sisters start every day and every event with gratefulness and with remembering Mother Earth and all the gifts that have been given to us for a good life that we should be able to have in this creation, with all the wonderful plants and animals and all the different elements of the creation that give us so much beauty and give us everything we need if we would only act as originally instructed so that life could continue in this creation. So when we think of that, they just say, thank you. And so I am thankful. I'm thankful for all of that. And I'm very thankful that we have two very exciting guests with us. And what we're going to be talking about, why not diplomacy, ceasefire now, especially for Yemen and Gaza and Israel and Palestine. And so our two wonderful guests here are, I'll just go around, is first Aisha Juman, Dr. Aisha Juman, who is an epidemiologist and is the executive director of Yemen Relief and Reconstruction Foundation. Welcome so much. We're so glad to have you here, Aisha. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, thank you so much. You are so kind. You're so kind and you're so hardworking. Oh my God. All the things that you're in the middle of and that you're always got the latest information and putting it to the use it needs. So thank you. Thank you so much, Aisha. And of course, friend of the show and at least Nobel Peace Laureate nominee, and just such a wonderful activist, lifelong activist and friend of the show, and board chair at World Beyond War, and also heading up, which we'll talk some more about, Merchants of Death Tribunal, our friend Kathy Kelly. Thank you. Welcome, Kathy.
Greetings. Hello.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to have you both on the show because it's just such a crucial topic, and it's one that so many people are suffering so much and the solutions, I would almost say, I always think of simple but not easy. But anyway, before we get thoroughly into it, I want to just quickly say, when we think about why not diplomacy, think about what's going on in Yemen, in Gaza, what are the values that come to your minds most prominently? So, and I think we'll just go first to you, Dr. Juman, Aisha. What would you say for some of the values?
Justice. Justice is always something that is on my mind every time I see something like this happen. And then the other one is mercy. We need a lot more mercy in our world.
Yes. Beautiful. So important. Thank you so much. And Kathy?
Sharing resources. Rather than trying to control other people's resources, we should be sharing our resources. And so when I think of children who are hungry, who will be traumatized for the rest of their lives by this aching hunger, and not to mention the fear and the displacement and the idea of children who have on their bodies written WC, NSF, wounded child, no surviving family. We must share our resources with those children and stop being selfish and greedy and so vulgar in our cruelty.
Thank you. Yes, we need to do things so differently. It's such an outrage what's going on. So I want to say, well, I'm going to go back to my usual. I usually think of truth and love when I'm thinking about this, our topics. And we have a variety of topics, but it always comes down to what is really happening. As Dr. King said, unarmed truth and unconditional love. That unarmed truth of what's really happening, that people are really being massacred, and that there's a lot of excusiology that's going on or misguided thinking, and there's not people coming to the table, and then back to the love. So people, the love that causes people to fear others. Maybe we're afraid and we want to protect people, but we're not protecting them. It's just making it worse and worse. And then there's the greed and the truth of the matter, that resources are being stolen rather than shared, and that people are making big money off of. We'll get into that. Big money off of it. So let us just start with so now that we've talked about some of the values, that let's start with what is really going on. And let's say in terms of, if we start with Gaza, I think, about, and really in Yemen and Gaza. And so why don't you both each share, some overview of that for people that's most up to date on what's happening. So,
Doctor,
I would like Kathy to start.
I'm stalking her because I go to your Twitter feed so often, Aisha, just to try to see what's happening. So please, Aisha, if you could let us know what you think.
Okay, so basically what we all have been seeing, a genocide being committed with total U.S. support and Western countries' support on our, phones and our TVs. And it's just heartbreaking, and it's shocking. It's unbelievable that something like this would be unfolding in this century, and that instead of stopping it, we have countries that presumably wrote the laws of war after World War II are the ones who are, supporting it. So this has just really shattered any illusion I have of Western countries, democracies, or value system. They only, bring these when their enemies or their adversaries do it. But when they are doing it, when their allies are doing it, then they don't just bury the information so the American public don't know what's happening. They spread lies, constant lies. And so you have a country like Yemen, who's been, for a decade, reeling from an aggression that was US supported and led by the Saudis and the Emiratis since 2015. And it's the country that's been blockaded and still is under blockade. It's the one that said, you know what, I'm not going to stop and watch a genocide. I'm going to try and do something about it. And what did they decide to do? They made two announcements. One was in November, which is over a month after the horror started in Gaza, Israel, and said any Israeli owned or linked ship is not going to be passing through the Bab el-Mandeb unless there is a ceasefire. And when there was a lull in activities and in fighting, those 6 days, they actually stopped. They're not attacking ships. They're just telling ships, use another route. You cannot go through Bab el-Mandeb. Not a single death has occurred since they installed these policies. Of course, nothing happened, and instead of the U.S. doing something about it, they decided to send, military ships to the Red Sea that belongs to Yemen, and they decided that they are going to be fighting and deterring. That's the word they use, which is we need to be very careful with U.S. use of language. They're not deterring. They're actually attacking Yemen. The second item that the Ansar Allah and the government in Sana'a did was in December. And in December, they said, okay, since, there's so much need in Gaza and no food or medicine or anything is entering Gaza, and that now we're, a few months after October, they said no ships, regardless of who owns it, is going to go to Israel until humanitarian aid is allowed into Gaza. Who would say no to this? Which person in the right mind will say we should not allow food and fuel and medicine enter into Gaza, which is actually, by the way, U.S. policy. U.S. policy is saying we're trying to get aid into Gaza, yet they haven't done anything about it. So when Yemen said no ships, regardless of who owns it, can pass to Israel until humanitarian aid enters into Gaza, the U.S. started bombing Yemen. It's like, how on earth does, and again, not a single person died from any of the Yemen attacks. They basically instruct ships that are going to Israel or linked to Israel to find an alternative route. And there is an alternative route. Yes, it's a little bit more expensive, but it doesn't compare at all to genocide and preventing food and medicine getting into Gaza. So that's where we are. With U.S. had already targeted 100 sites in Yemen with airstrikes and also from, firing from the military ships in the area. The UK supported them in that endeavor. And the last one was actually this week, where they bombed a park during the day when it was the most busy in terms of people attending the park. So that's where we are with what's happening in Yemen. There is so much information. They're saying Yemen is not allowing all ships, which is a lie. They're only preventing those two ships. However, once the US and the UK started targeting Yemen, the Yemeni in Sana'a said, okay, now US ships and UK ships can't pass either, which I think is only fair. If you're going to be bombing us, we're not going to allow you to pass through. So I'll stop here, but it really, and the U.S. State Department keeps, producing videos. Blinken is saying it has nothing to do with Gaza. If there is anything the listeners need to know, is what the Yemenis do is actually protecting the people of Gaza. And this is actually required of all countries under the Geneva Convention.
Kathy, would you want to And maybe a little more about what's going on in Gaza.
Well, you
And
know,
whatever you want
the,
to add.
the people that have survived in Gaza have experienced day after day after day of bombing with 2,000-pound bombs, with 150 milliliter bullets being shot from extremely sophisticated weapon systems that the United States has equipped Israel with. There is no let up in the United States sending of weapons, and never has this come in front of the U.S. Congress for a vote since this tragedy has begun. And the United States double standard just seems to sink to a new low and then another new low, and to the point where it almost can't be believed. So many of the people in Gaza depend on UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Administration. There are, I need some help with this. I think 30,000 UNRWA workers in Gaza, or in the region, and at least 1,800 inside of Gaza. And because of a report that wasn't investigated, verified, vetted, that there were, at first they said 12, then they said 10. Now I think it could be down to maybe 2 or 3 people working with UNRWA who are part of Hamas, but Hamas is part of the culture in that enclave of people who've been trapped and imprisoned. Then this was used as an excuse for the United States to stop the aid that the U.S. channels through United Nations Relief and Works Administration. Well, the U.S. has said, well, we already gave the 300,000 that we're supposed to give. But now you've got the Republicans rushing in saying, oh, stop it all completely, never again give UNRWA assistance. So then meanwhile, you look at blockade. I mean, I came at this from the years of going back and forth to Iraq under blockade and seeing more and more pediatrics wards filled up with children who looked like wizened little old men as the juices flowed out of their bodies, and they were starving. They were being starved by U.S. policies. The U.S. helped blockade Yemeni air, land, and sea ports. Aisha couldn't go over and see her own family, and she had to engage in the most incredible contortions to try and get the aid that her group, the Yemen Relief and Reconstruction Foundation, wanted to send. By the time they get some of those materials past this blockade, they'd be expired, they'd be spoiled. So people in Yemen understand blockade and bombing. And when we see the Friday demonstrations in Yemen, and it's a sea of people every week, massive, of course people understand what's been going on in Gaza. They've been experiencing it. And of course, Gaza's been under blockade and under siege. Now you think of the massive suffering and loss of life and generational, intergenerational trauma caused by, just imagine, only the blockades. And then when there's blockage of United States shipping, and maybe some people on Amazon might get their products a little bit later, suddenly it's cause to get the big guns out, the arsenals, the cruise missiles. And it's also futile and foolish. Even Newsweek, I told you I'm on Aisha's Twitter site all day long. And today she posted from Newsweek, they said it's insanity. I mean, this is a mainstream outfit. Daniel DePetris saying this is the definition of insanity because it's not working. They think they're going to be able to bomb the Houthis out of being able to launch these. They can't find those missiles. They put them on the back of, trucks that then pull off and go and hide. They're no match for the agility of what the Houthis are able to accomplish. And there are defections. I wish Aisha could speak a little bit more to what's happening on the ground in terms of defections and people saying, you know what, we weren't with Ansar Allah before, but we are now.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. I would also say about the UNRWA report that Israel actually supplied to the US government, and Channel 4 in the UK, got a copy of the report, and there isn't even a single person. It's all unfounded. And so this was published just 2 days ago by Channel 4 in the UK. This is not a friendly station. This is a UK station where they said there isn't a single evidence in that report. But that's actually how these lies, are intended, the intention of it. So spread lies, have a policy that is devastating to the natives, and then even if the truth comes, there isn't anything you can do about it. This was true of the babies that they said were killed and mutilated, the 40 babies, remember that story? And there was zero evidence of that. This is true of the rape. There is zero evidence of that. So it's always, let's spread lies that forms policy, and then even if it turns out to be lies, there is nothing anybody can do about it. And people, once it's exposed, don't even know it was exposed and it's a lie because it's not covered the same way. So this is quite actually disturbing. And these are people who have, studied the media and know the impact of, spreading misinformation. And in terms of the support of the Yemeni people for Gaza and for the Palestinians, I need to say here that Yemenis, not just they understand what it means to be under a blockade and also under bombardment, they also are willing to take that cost in support of Gaza and in support of the Palestinians. So you have a population that knows exactly what it means, and yet it's saying, if that's what you're going to do to us for our stand, we're fine with it. Because, this is how principled they are on this. And we're not just talking about Ansarullah, we're talking about the whole of Yemen population. You have, we see pictures of every Friday of demonstrations in Sana'a, but similar demonstrations are happening in every single city of Yemen. And, these are, I would say, between 3 to 4 million people every Friday come out in support of Gaza and in support of Palestine and calling for a ceasefire and calling for humanitarian aid to get into Gaza, knowing that how much it's going to cost them. And we have seen how the U.S. started bombing Yemen, and we've seen also yesterday where the State Department and the U.S. is saying, you know what, that peace deal that you're going to have, that was going to pay salaries, it's not going to happen. We're not allowing it to happen. So the U.S. not just is bombing Yemen, is now derailing the peace process in Yemen. Going back to the support in Yemen for Gaza and for Palestine, a lot of the group that had been fighting Ansarullah and the Sana'a government in the last 9 years have actually are supporting Ansarullah's position. Their most vicious enemies who've written, just really vile things about them are now coming and supporting them. And not just that, they're also helping them to get more weapons, which is really a kind of, nobody ever thought that this is going to happen. We have a whole regiments, military regiments that had defected from the other side, going to Sana'a to say, we are with you. Hizb al-Islah, which is the largest, political party in Yemen, had, their leaders had, came out publicly supporting Ansarullah's position in this. So you have only very few, a fringe that is not supporting this. But I would say at this point in time, and it will be a safe bet that over 90% of all Yemenis, regardless of their political affiliation, are supporting Ansarullah in this position.
And could you comment, Aisha, on what other Arab countries' populations might be possibly concluding when they see what Yemen is doing and what their governments are not doing?
Yeah, this is something it came out a lot in discussion yesterday when the
Right.
Saudi government made an announcement that they're not going to normalize with Israel until there is a Palestinian state up to 1967 borders and with East Jerusalem as a capital. And if you look at the comments from Arab populations, they're all saying, this doesn't compare anything to what the Yemenis are doing. You have more power than the Yemenis, yet the Yemenis are doing more than you. If you look at the popularity of Yemeni now, not just in the Arab world, but even in the Muslim world, it's amazing. If you go to Turkey today, there are pictures of Abdul Malik al-Houthi, the leader of Ansar Allah, that are being, unveiled in huge buildings. I mean, these are huge pictures. Yemenis in the UK, they will go to a restaurant, and once the owner knows they're Yemeni, they wouldn't allow them to pay for food because I was in Oman actually in January, and the minute I say I'm Yemeni, everybody was like, "You are the only country that is standing with Palestine. We're so proud of you." And everybody's saying, we are originally from Yemen. This is our, and there is such pride. Even in Saudi Arabia, I mean, any country right now, even Egypt, the syndicate of journalists in Egypt had a protest, and they were saying, in their chant, were telling the government, Ibn Sana'a, the son of Sana'a, did something, and you're not. Can you learn from the son of Sana'a? So there is a huge popularity and support for Yemen's stand on this. And again, whether it's in Pakistan, whether it's in Indonesia, whether it's in Egypt, it's really, and even here in the US, you see a lot of young people making TikToks, videos, supporting Yemen's stand on that. And some, which I find really funny, they actually memorized how to say in Arabic, we have stopped this vessel from going to Israel.
Mm. I think it is so wonderful, and it's so clear that when people know what's going on, one of the things I was just talking about, actually propaganda and persuasion, the amount of misinformation and just bold-faced lies, the absence, the leaving out of critical facts, like the conditions and the reasons and the actual facts of what's going on. And when people know the facts, the actual facts, which does not include a vast number of people in the U.S., are under total misinformation about what's going on. What goes out in the New York Times, in the mainstream media, in MSNBC, has mostly been just terribly, terribly ill-informed, disinformation, misinformation, and just to a shocking degree. And I think that part of that has to do with, I think I want to ask you, Kathy, if you want to talk a little about the Merchants of Death Tribunal and some of the reasons why some of that misinformation and disinformation goes out there. Why?
Well, this is a remarkable time, I think. Just today, a group of 15 young people in a suburb of Chicago called Niles, Illinois, locked their arms together and sat down and shut down the entrance to a weapon-making production place. I didn't even know about it, called Woodward. And they had many, many supporters, and they just got out of jail right before this radio presentation. Well, this is happening all over the world. You see people shutting down British Aerospace Enterprises stockholder meeting. They had to shut the meeting down because of the disruptions. It's almost as though Code Pink is being reincarnated in all kinds of different settings.
Wonderful.
And started getting together for the Merchants of Death War Crimes Tribunal. It certainly was not part of my expectation but I wouldn't be able to keep up with the dynamic actions that are happening all over the place. And so we do the Merchants of Death War Crimes Tribunal completely online. But this Saturday, we're fortunate because we have Aisha and Mairead Maguire together. I mean, that's quite a dynamic duo, talking about Gaza and Yemen. And so I really want to encourage your listeners to tune in. It will be at 12 o'clock Eastern time for a meetup. It's not in person, but we at least can be on the same call and people can their questions and their comments. And one of the things we'll start off with is Mairead Maguire in the West Bank after she had just been tear gassed and shot. And of course, that didn't stop Mairead from giving a very good pitch that we've got to stop what's being done to the Palestinian people. So it's just a 2-minute video, but we'll start with that. The Merchants of Death War Crimes Tribunal is focusing on Boeing and Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and General Atomics. And those four have steadily, without pause, made great profits from the weapons that they've sent that have been used again and again. I had a chance to be in an interview with Aisha, I think it was close to almost a year ago. And I asked her, do you think war crimes have been committed in Yemen by these different companies? And she just did, in no time could say, well, yes, there was this funeral that was hit. There was this wedding that was hit, this school bus full of children. So that sort of thing has been going on in relation to Yemen since 2015, using U.S. weapons and U.S. approval and U.S. cover. And I think that greenlights some of what's been done by Israel now. I think the Israelis, once upon a time, if a hospital was hit, there'd be demonstrations. We'd say, you can't do this, stop. Well, every hospital in Gaza has now been hit. And even IDF soldiers have dressed up in scrubs and imitation hospital gowns and gone in to continue their killing in Jenin. So will we, this is maybe the first time people are watching genocide on their screens. And no matter what misinformation gets put out there, people have a gut reaction when they see that children are being slaughtered, maimed, tortured, starved, suffering without clean water, and this horrid, terrible, but necessary acronym that's written on the limbs of the children. WCNSF. Wounded child, no surviving family. Or the children who know that their parents are writing their names on their limbs in case the family is separated through bombing or these terrible raids. And then when you think about Israeli soldiers putting out on their screens videos of them dancing and celebrating, and, making mockery. It's just a terrible, terrible, wrong, cruel situation. But I think people are beginning to say, okay, I know what side I'm going to be on, and it's not on the side of the people who are acting as barbaric and brutal. I just want to recommend a BBC interview. It's a remarkable piece of work of mercenaries, U.S. mercenaries who are being paid millions by the United Arab Emirates to come over and act as assassins in Yemen and then train others to act as assassins. And if this is what the U.S. exports, mercenaries, weapons, new ways to use the drones so that they can supposedly target people, and then now quadricopters can go in through the buildings with rifles mounted on them. This is insane. And who wants to keep supporting this? AIPAC will keep purchasing U.S. senators and Congress people. And that's why we also have the demonstrations, yes, but we also have to do the hard work of continuing to call and write and
Yes.
hold fire the feet of every single elected official who continues to say, well, like they said to Aisha, oh, there's no blockade. That's what they told her about Yemen. Or, yeah. So Aisha, if you could talk a bit about your encounters with legislators, I think that's also instructive.
Yeah, like you said, legislators, although we think we are their constituents and we put them in office and they need to be listening to us, when you meet with them, they would be nodding, but when it comes to the interest of especially the arms industry, you could not change them a bit. That's who pays for them to be in office. I remember an interview that was done with, it was Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, when there was potentially going to be a peace in Yemen. And they talked to their shareholders to tell them, don't worry about it. First of all, peace is not going to happen. And then we still have a huge market in the Middle East. This is all talked. I mean, they said that to their shareholders, to their board, that not to worry, we will still continue to be, the Middle East will continue to be our biggest market. And so they know and they know exactly what they're doing. They know that all this money is blood money, and they're fine with it. But they're fine with it because they make money out of it, and it's our elected officials that need to be responding to us. They need to stop supporting them. The election system and the financing of election system in the U.S. is really dismal for a democracy where they are held hostages to these people who have money, and a lot of them want their interest. They don't want the interest of the general public or the American population. And so I think we definitely need reforms for financing elections. And I'm not sure that that Congress is going to be voting to support that. Look at what's happening now with, the progressives. Every single one of them is being targeted by IPAC because of their stand on Gaza and Palestine. And they're putting millions of dollars to make sure that they boot them out of office. So what do we get at the end? We get warmongers who will support special interests. And the special interest, unfortunately, their interest is against 90% of our interest of the population of the US. How do we make change in that? I think this is an important topic that we as American people need to be talking about. And how do we take, I would say, dirty money, blood money out of our elections? It's been extremely difficult to talk to our elected officials when it comes to the arms industry.
Yes.
I'm told here, it's like, you have Boeing here. Do you think that they're going to listen to you or even half of their constituents over Boeing? So it's issues that we need to contend with.
Right.
But
it's very, very just wrong and really criminal. So many, as we say, it's the U.S. government of, for, and by the corporations, and the media is bought in to the arms industry. So that's part of it. Sometimes I call it Fear Inc. So it's the U.S. Military, industrial, congressional, media, and contractor establishment that is all over it. But I just want to make a mention of two things that are a little more, I don't want to say optimistic, but just the fact of the international law is there. Now, it has been trashed, and as Kathy, as you put so well, it is the heights or the depths of hypocrisy keeps growing on just how hypocritical it is. However, those laws are in place against genocide, against war for that matter, since 1927-28, but also the proportionality, all of the things, not hitting hospitals, not hitting schools, all of the things that have been flagrantly ignored. But also there are more people, somehow the truth is getting through other media, as the international media, the BBC you mentioned earlier, Al Jazeera, Democracy Now!, thank God for Democracy Now! And I want to say thank God for especially Jewish Voice for Peace. Jewish Voice for Peace, and I'm going to say our Buffalo chapter is thriving. And not only that, I am a member of, I won't say which, I hesitate to say which temple I am a member of here in Buffalo, as well as a couple of churches. They all know that. However, so I am meeting with people in not only our Jewish Voice for Peace group, which is thriving and showing Israel this very night, and re-showing it with the Western New York Peace Center and Buff State. Shout out Buff State. Israelism, which shows that the conflating of Zionism and Judaism has been very pronounced over many, many years, and knows the fact of the safety and security of people in Israel is intimately tied to the safety and security of people in Gaza, in the occupied territories. So those groups, it's like Veterans for Peace, who will come out and do that truth telling and say, we know that's wrong. So, and even in where I attend temple, so I just talked with somebody, a Jewish woman that I had no reason, I know we both go there, I've seen her there many times, and I have brought up and do bring up the people who are dying there when people are, when we're saying Kiddush, right? Who else do we want to remember who died? And I say the people in Gaza, the people in Israel and Palestine. And so this woman, when I said about being in favor of ceasefire, when we're talking informally, she said, oh yes, there are many of us. There's a whole contingent of people. So people are just afraid to say it, but they're learning more and more not to be afraid. So this is where I think it's the combination of people really knowing what's going on in terms of all the flagrant war crimes, and and also people understanding that the merchants of death are just raking in the dough, and the misinformation that goes ahead and allows that, and that includes coming out of Israel, because it is very slanted. Even your most trying to be, it's still a big slant and a lot of misinformation. And anyway, about the Israeli government is doing a horrendous job, or you could say a good job, of cloaking and allowing and perpetrating war crimes. So, what would you say about the UN system and where and what we can do there, or other avenues for helping to work for change? And first, yeah. You, Aisha, and then Kathy.
Actually, I was going to ask Kathy to speak about the ICG, the International Criminal Court, and the case that was presented by South Africa, and what her thoughts are on that.
Well, I think the International Court of Justice in South Africa did a very brave and exemplary thing, but they didn't come out and say, impose a ceasefire now. I think that they could have made a stronger conclusion. And when I think about what's commensurate to the suffering that is continuing to unfold in Gaza, the strongest possible conclusion is so necessary. But, it seems that we do have the Leahy law on the books, for instance, here in the United States. And if there are violations of international law, then aid shouldn't be going forward. We've already got that law. We've got the possibility that Senator Sanders now is definitely going to be much more vigorous in saying that there shouldn't be another dime spent going to Israel because of the violations of international law, because of the violations of U.S. law. So I think we all have something we can hook our efforts onto in terms of letter writing and calling, constant letter writing, constant calling. And at least the International Court of Justice began to put forth the word genocide as something that could definitely, in that 84-page document, be invoked as descriptive of what Israel is doing. So it did make a big contribution, I think, in that way. But it's almost as though, there's a kind of a choreography and you have to turn your attention to whatever the pressure point is at a given moment sometimes. And it's not the same for everybody. But I do want to say that, okay, we don't have think tanks like the ones that back up the major weapon-making corporations. But I watch Hassan al-Tayyab from the Friends Committee on National Legislation, Shireen al-Ademi in Michigan, Aisha, and for years they've been a think tank that's been strong and resilient and clear, and they've educated. So, I mean, why are all these young people out on the streets? Why is it that Jewish Voice for Peace rabbis are going to get together with Black Christians and walk from Philadelphia to Washington, D.C.? They've been educated by the kind of small group, grassroots, volunteer think tanks. And so I think we should be very, very grateful for that strength. And, keep reminding ourselves it's happening worldwide, maybe not to the extent of the Friday gatherings in Yemen, which are just utterly overwhelming. But you do, this isn't stopping. I used to say, the world came closer than ever before to stopping a war before it started in 2003 against Iraq. But then where did it go? Gone. But this isn't stopping. This is continuing, and we will continue to see the kinds of shifting alliances that Aisha described are happening inside of Yemen. We're going to see those shifting alliances. You've got Time Magazine reporting on some of what Aisha just told us. You've got Newsweek just today saying that this is insanity to keep on doing the same thing over and over again when it doesn't work. And just that gut reaction of so many people that they don't want to continue to watch a genocide happening more or less on their shift. So we do need to give people the tools to, I noticed that Code Pink is standing out there with the phone number. Call your congressperson, call your senator. We've got to write the letters. Robert Naiman gives materials all the time for what to write to the various senators and congresspeople. And then to keep this internationalized as best we can is really, really also important. I hope that President Biden caught on that in New York, there's a lot of discontent. And if he wants to campaign now for a future election spot, he might really need to revise what he's saying about Yemen, about Gaza, about Israel. And this idea of unwavering support is a sick and cruel notion.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
Vicky, I was just, so there were two things. One is about the ICJ. When it happened, when South Africa presented its case, none of the U.S. main media covered it. But when Israel presented a rebuttal, then every single one of them reported it, which is kind of really, the bias is so blatant. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. I also want to say that actually Israeli media is much better than U.S. media when it comes to issues that gather Israel. Absolutely better. I actually read and follow Israeli media to get more facts than I can get from US media on Israel and Palestine. So it again, it shows that the bias. And I remember when Twitter used to say anytime a news agency prints something, they will say this is a Russia affiliated media or this is a China affiliated media. I think we need to start writing when the New York Times and all of these CNN, we should say US affiliated media. And I actually started doing that in my tweets because we
Yes.
need to let people, these are mouthpieces of the government. These are not, we don't have independent media in the mainstream media.
And
A lot of these people, for access to the government, are willing to print what the government wants. So I will be, I'll be in for the scoop. So so I think we need to hold the U.S. media, especially the mainstream media, responsible, and we need to expose them for who they are and what they are. That they are mouthpiece of the U.S. government. That's basically what they are. The second thing I wanted to mention, and you asked about Vicky, was the UN. What is the UN ability to do anything? As long as we have the Security Council, where the US can veto any proposal that comes in front of it, it's really actually quite disturbing. I want to share that when Yemen, when there were a lot of kids being killed, there was a UN organization that had a list that's called a list of shame of countries that kill children. So 3 times they would list Saudi Arabia, and the US will pressure them to remove Saudi Arabia from the list. So the US has a huge influence over what the UN can or cannot do. Even the last UN resolution and the UN Security Council that they debated and bent backward to get the US to agree to it, after they put all the language and they watered it down, it has no teeth, and they put it out for vote, the US abstained. And so that's one of the issues we have. However, right now, the Algeria is presenting to the UN Security Council a vote to again for a ceasefire. And if there is, a final judgment from the ICJ, the International Criminal Court, that not the ICC, the ICJ, that Israel is indeed committing genocide, that will go to the UN Security Council. And if the US vetoes it, then that goes to the General Assembly. And if we have only 2/3 of the countries sign on it, then these countries can, for example, refuse to allow Israel be part of the UN. So there is ways to circumvent U.S. protection of Israel, but we need the ICJ to make a ruling. They did say that they were giving Israel a month to respond. A month is almost over. We've seen a huge amount of information that was on the media by the Israeli soldiers showing the atrocities and the war crimes they're committing. They actually had a Telegram channel where they would post these atrocities that they were committing. And apparently this was supposed to be a psychological war against the people in Gaza. So all of that is evidence that the ICJ and the South Africa can put in front of the court. So I do hope that they make a final judgment and then that the UN General Assembly can make a good decision, because the UN General Assembly already voted, I think, 198 countries for a ceasefire, but it wasn't binding. But if they have a court that supports them, then it will be binding.
Wow. Well, that, inshallah, from your lips to God's ears. And I want to say, as you're speaking, I'm just thinking, right is might. Right is might. Because we are right about this. That just to, what I always feel the recipe is ceasefire, diplomacy, stop the arms sales, and use international law for all of our conflict areas. It's just, again, simple but not easy. But the other thing is people power. So whether it's the power of, the preponderance of people, when the people know what's going on, and even for the countries, when the countries have some independence. So what you were saying about General Assembly is also very helpful. But I'm very aware that we're running out of time, and I'm so excited having you both here with just so much experience and knowledge and courage and insight, and we're just so thrilled. So I just want to remind people that Saturday the 10th at noon, there will be the War Crimes Tribunal special meetup at noon Eastern Standard Time, and people should go to merchantsofdeath.org, sign up, and you'll have a wealth of videos and all kinds of evidence and information, some of which comes from Aisha, I know, and all kinds of things that Kathy and Brad, and other people associated have put together, some very highly impactful. We just have to spread that. So I want each of you to give your sort of final thoughts that you'd like to share, just for a little bit. So Aisha and then Kathy. So.
Yeah, I feel very hopeful. And the reason I feel very hopeful, I think Generation Z and the young people are just amazing. They are not, they're not watching the mainstream media. I think that's what's working for them. They're finding the information themselves. They are critical thinkers, and these are the leaders of the future. And they have risen to the occasion. They are the ones who are, out in the streets. They are the ones who are exposing the genocide that's happening in Gaza and the war crimes that's happening in a lot of different places, whether it's in Yemen or Congo and any other place. They've been really amazing to watch. And that's why I'm hopeful for our future with these young people. If you looked at the polls, I think 80% of them disagree with President Biden policy on Palestine and Gaza. At least 50% of them think there is genocide in this age group. So it's very heartening to see the young generation not blinded, like my generation. I felt very lonely. I feel very lonely sometimes in my generation. There aren't as many people who are willing to look at facts and speak up. Even if they agree with me, they're afraid and intimidated to speak up. These young people are not afraid. And like you said, a lot of the young Jewish people, whether it's with Jewish Voice for Peace or any other organization, have just been exceptional. And there are a lot of people like them from all faiths.
Hallelujah. Alhamdulillah. And Kathy, just a very...
Well, I think the beautiful symbol is that one of the judges for the Merchants of Death War Crimes Tribunal is Aisha's daughter, Arwa Muqdad. And she's herself an accomplished scholar and a reporter, and the artwork that runs through the family is stunning. So, Aisha, I learn from you every time I'm with you, and I know that in just a couple more days I'll learn more. So please, folks, think about joining Mairead Maguire and Aisha Juman on Saturday. And also, let's think about the Brown students. There are 16 of them fasting from all solid foods because they want their university to divest. And so, follow the young people and let us hope that the young ones that are starving and in agony right now in Gaza and in Yemen will somehow be spared, and that we can begin to share our resources and build bridges, not to go over and control other people's land, but rather to be able to say, we don't have a God-given right to take other people's precious and irreplaceable resources, and we're sorry for all that we've done before. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't thank you both enough. The words really won't say just how grateful. So we're solidarity and courage and thanks. So this is Talking Peace, and together we've been talking peace in truth and love.
And thanks to Richard.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Richard. But thank you both so much. What a powerful, powerful show this will be. So, yeah, and we just have to keep getting the word out, and we will. So we have, and as you say, inshallah, all of this will come together, and just may it be quickly. That's all. It has to be quickly. But anyway, it has to be. So grateful to you both. Thank you so very much. I can't thank you enough, really. So I'll be there. I'll be there on Saturday, of course. I'm very grateful to be there. And actually, I think about that power lunch with Marie, the power lunch at in Salt Lake City, right?
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah. Anyway, and Aisha, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be on those two groups where I'm getting all the information. I can't quite keep up with it. I keep trying to catch up with it. It's always going further because things keep happening, and you're right on top of them. And both of you, honestly, you are making such a difference, and I'm just so grateful to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you both very much. And wonderful to see you, Kathy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Blessings. Thank you both so much.
Thank
Big
you.
hugs.
Thank you, Richard. Bye-bye.
Bye for now. Thanks so much.
Okay, there you go. You did it.
There we go. There it was. Well, thank you so much. I had to put a new thing in my hearing aid because I didn't want to not hear people at all. It was happening in class that one of them wasn't working because I had to replace a part or something. Now, you texted